111.
Got my COVID shot yesterday, guys, so I've got Bill Gates' microchip in me now. So
Well done, Mayor. An example for us all. Thank you.
I got a fever last night.
Probably close the door because we kind of.
Councillor Gerwing's got some rash at her injection site, but I didn't get that. But I did get the fever. It wasn't a big fever; it was small. Very well. Welcome to the Northern Rockies Region Municipality Budget Meeting. Please be advised that this meeting is available to the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. Can I get a motion, please, to adopt the agenda? Moved by Councillor Dolan, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. And adoption of the minutes of the Consolidated Comprehensive 2020 Budget Meeting minutes have been previously adopted. New business items. Mr. Barry, the 2021 budget introduction.
Thank you, Mayor. In front of you, you'll have the final proposed 2021 NRM budget. There hasn't been much change from the preliminary budgets. Minor tweaks here and there, but document itself. Tax levy shows, currently the tax levy shows a decrease from last year's levy of $290. And that's, of course, after $409,000 has been utilized to offset potential lost revenue, and $582 that was direct. And resolution to offset some additional, so a total of $9 was used to offset the line. We'll get a little more.
Sorry to interrupt. You're cutting out a little bit, Scott. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm having a hard time.
Did you get the information on the tax levy, Councillor Roper?
Most of it, but some words were missed. I think it's a technical difficulty.
Okay.
I'll try my best to keep along.
I'll try my best to talk like the mayor. So I was saying that the levy is $296,000 less than last year's levy, and that's after a total of $991,000 has been applied to the levy for the 409 for the offset revenue, or to offset the revenue decreases for this year, and 582 to offset those expenses. So it's part of the discussions that happen in the preliminary discussions or preliminary meetings with council. And Ryan will walk through a bit of that as we walk through the document. Preparing the annual budget each year is a fairly daunting task, and I just want to thank all the staff that were involved. All the departments have a part to play in this, to pull everything together. We try to improve the document, to take it to have it more user-friendly and for the council and the public. And I think, again, this year you'll see an example that we've been able to, with some efficient, document a little easier to read. And I thank all the staff that were involved in the background behind the scenes. That said, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan. He's going to walk council through the document, starting off on tab 1, and he'll go as fast or as slow as council wishes to go. Considering that we've already been through the document once, discussions with Ryan is we'll probably take a little bit of more of a high level, and council can stop and interrupt if there's any questions. We're not providing detail that we've already provided. It's a second time council needs clarification. That I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, and I think we're good till 2 today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Of course, the directors are on background. When we the various departments, they'll jump in and talk to the.
Mr. Barry, is there an opportunity for the public to comment on the budget? I don't see one on the agenda here, but is there an opportunity?
There could be, I mean,
So it's up to you. So in our standard, agenda order from the procedure bylaw, the public comment and, period typically falls at the end.
Okay,
Though in our regular agendas, there is that, opportunity before agenda business is determined where the public can comment. So because the budget agenda doesn't have a standard order, we've put the public comment period at the end. But if desires by resolution, you can create comment periods now or throughout or however you.
do we have any members of the public, today? Okay, Ms. Vandersteen? I'd like to give Ms. Vandersteen an opportunity to comment if she wishes to, anyway.
If you can hear us, if you have something you'd like to address council, feel free to use the raise hand feature. And if you don't use the raise hand feature, we'll assume you don't have a comment.
Okay, very well. And we received one comment on the budget already. I don't have that in front of me. Do you have that? Well, maybe we'll use that at the end of the budget process. Okay, very well, Mr. Carter? No, it was just a comment on the staff's good work in doing the budget, and I just wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for the public to say what they wanted to say about the budget before and after. Mr. Barry?
yeah, so it was emailed out this morning to council. It was just the one comment. It was a positive comment, so that went out to council, and that was the only official response you received. There was the occasional call or some dialogue with the public for clarification, but again, not a whole lot. And again, we. No?
Yep. Okay, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, councilors online. Can you hear me okay? So budget, is very similar to the preliminary budget, so the, really high level again. And as we get into the, if you have a question, just, stop me and.
It's cutting out a lot.
Yeah, we're missing words here and there, and yeah, I don't think it's your microphone. I think it's just an interruption, perhaps in the connection. I'm not too sure.
Okay. I will stay a little bit closer to the microphone.
We're connected
here.
directly via phone line, so we're thinking the audio should work. It's probably, we found this morning in tests again that we were having issues.
I don't think it's your proximity to the microphone. I think it's just cutting out once in a while, because when you do come through, you're perfectly legible, and then it goes to silence. So I'm not too sure.
Okay. How is that? Is that a little bit better?
For now, but it was cutting out before. But let's see what happens.
Okay. So the budget is laid out with the overview and the summary of the budget to start, which has the sample properties and the reserve fund projections. Second section is the operations and special projects. Each department will speak to those sections applicable to them. Then the third section is the grants to groups, which reviews the grant and aid program, community groups, as well as the Big Four cultural subsidiary groups. And then lastly, we'll review the capital and asset renewal, where the pink sheets outlines the proposed projects. So that's a high level of the agenda. New documents in the final budget that were not in the preliminary budget. So for councillors they're looking for those to refer to. There's the tax rate comparisons to other communities, which you'll find in tab 2. We have the reserve projections in this one as well, outlining what the reserve balances are. That's in tab 3. We've also added in tab 6 the council legislative budget and the training and development budget. And then when we get to the capital section, there's going to be that list of the AIDP capital listings. So Those are just some documents that weren't falling in the preliminary ones. So moving to tab 1, our overview. Okay, I think that's okay. Is the sound still coming through okay now? Okay.
It hadn't cut out that whole time there.
Okay. So the budget overview, this is the information that's already been provided to council during the preliminary budget meetings. The overview explains the difference between the green operating sheets, pink sheets, and special projects. As it stands now, the proposed net tax requirement for the budget is $20,949,675. This is on table 1. This includes council's resolution during the preliminary budget to apply $409,000 for the expected revenue loss and $582,000 for additional expenses due to COVID-19. So the levy, $20,949,675, is $296,000 less than the 2020 budget, which is all summarized in table 1.
So, Mr. Carter, in thinking about this surplus, and the amount that we're under the budget of 2021, I propose that we reduce that to something in the neighborhood of $21,350,000. That would bring it down $100,000 under last year's budget, and to move that remaining balance into reserves for future use. So, councillors, we can either deal with this now or we can deal with this at the end of the budget, but my proposal is we had voted to move $500,000 of that surplus that we had, the $1.7 million, to reduce our budget for 2021, and I was thinking that the better approach would be to reduce it by about $200,000 to be just under the 2020 budget. Councillor Gerwing?
So sorry, just because so you're proposing now, instead of taking $500,000 of this, how much of the surplus?
I'm proposing to take, well, $200,000.
As opposed to the,
Yes.
okay.
What would that bring it in at, Mr. Carter? All right.
1,000, right?
So maybe call it 300,000 then, Councillor Growing?
Now you're saying,
Yes.
dollars less. You change the overall budget? I guess I'm just wondering what your rationale.
I don't think it would, so I think it wouldn't change the amount of taxation materially to the residents, but it would give future councils extra money to deal with what they need to deal with in the future. So,
Okay.
and I believe that if we reduce it too much this year, we'll be unable to reduce it so for the 2022 budget next year, we would be unable to reduce it below the 2021 budget if we left it there. So what I'm proposing is just taking a little extra money and putting it in reserves, as I've said, sort of like the household savings account. I think we have an opportunity to do that and move it in there so that the future councils down the road will have more wiggle room with their budgets. Go ahead.
Oh, Councillor
Oh,
Roper.
sorry, Councillor Roper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really like that approach. It's very forward thinking. So I don't know if council wants to think about it, make a decision at the end of the meeting, but I'm certainly in favor of making things easier for any future councils or for next year's budget.
Councillor Gerwing.
So I'm just trying to determine a process here. So I don't know if staff is keeping a running total of what the budget will look like based on what we approve as opposed to what we don't approve. So I'm just wondering, in terms of process, if we want to find out at the end of our deliberations what the budget is actually standing at, and then make that change or not, because we might make it by not approving something that's in here. I don't know that.
That is possible. Mr. Carter, do you want
I
to
was just
speak
going
to that?
to, echo that. I was going to say that the other changes throughout the budget process that might impact that in levy, so it might be, worthwhile looking at it at the end of the budget process on what you'd like to do at that point.
Councillor Penny.
The other question I have is, where would we put this money? In that other fund that we had spoken of, right? Not in the just.
Also can elect if they want to put it in the financial stabilization reserve fund.
Okay.
Which we'll see that here under tab 3 once we get to it here, Ryan will various reserve funds and what currently would be going into that fund based on what the document looks like, but we can reconcile the information. And both Councillor Goering said at the end of once you get to the end, we can base calculations to say the tax levy is, because we're not actually adjusting the budget by doing what you're requiring. Actually, just adjusting what the required tax levy is to make up the revenues for the overall budget, and just from a technical. So at the end, we'll say this is where your levy sits based on the decisions that council's made throughout the process. And council at that time, if they wish to, can say, let's adjust the levy to X, and then pass a resolution to do that, and then whatever funds are left, or whatever it looks like.
Okay, so let's defer this then until the end. Mr. Carter, do you want to continue, please?
Sure. Yep. No, that makes sense. So that was table 1. So table 2 summarizes the projected revenues and the changes from year to year. So there was a lot of work put in this year on revenue projections based on COVID-19's impact to the community. The column on the right highlights the changes in the projections for 2021 based on what the actuals were in 2020. So ACAP funding at the airport remains a large number that affects this table. And also there's the transfers from reserves, which includes community groups, roads, and equipment. Some of those transactions going on this year. So that's the revenue table that's outlined there. So moving along, tables 4, 5, and 6 in the overview summarizes the property assessments in the community. As discussed in previous meetings, the table will reflect the shift this year in averages that are decreasing in industrial assessments, and that also is paired with the increases in the residential. So this is the pendulum swing Scott had discussed in previous meetings, where there's that change of the distribution between the classes occurring. So table 6 does show the current splits by percentage, 6% for residential, 9.9% for business, and 84.1% for the industrial. So table 7 summarizes the proposed changes in the operating budget. It does not include capital and asset renewal projects. The table reflects an overall decrease, mostly due to the allowance for bad debt, and also the changes in the requests in the grants to groups. Wages are slightly up in this table, with the increases built into the collective agreement and the increased cost of benefits. And as previously discussed, there's also the changes in the contract services, as noted, the large increase in insurance costs, additional services such as 911, as well as moving technology into that out of materials and supplies. Those are some of the changes in that table. Table 8 is a summary of the capital projects and renewals, major maintenance and special projects. So highlighted in that table is $34 million in 2021 in those projects, 23.6 million from grants, which does not include the annual IDCA contribution. So with the IDCA contribution, the operations amount from taxes is 2.9 million. The last table on the summary is the impact on taxes. So for every 100,000 of reduction of the levy, the impact on a property that's 100,000. So a residential house valued at 100,000 on this table will see $2.06 if the levy is lowered by 100,000. That's that table for reference as we're looking at the overall levy. Are there any questions on the overview?
Councillor Souls.
I don't have a question on the overview, but I was planning on actually following along on my iPad and it won't let me. I'm wondering if you have a binder somewhere for me.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Carter, do you want to continue then?
I'll move along. So right behind the overview is our fold-out summary sheet. This was provided in the preliminary budget as well, updated with the 2020 actuals. It's good reference during our discussions, but we'll be covering each area in the department summaries. Overall, the 2020 actuals were roughly 4.2 million less than the budgeted amount. Department operations were under budget by almost 2 million, which was a big contribution to the overall amount. A number of capital and special projects also were not undertaken due to COVID-19, and then as well as the receiving grant. So those are all.
Any questions, councillors? Well, tab 2.
We'll move on to tab 2. So that's your sample properties. So this was provided in the preliminary budget. Again, shows the pendulum swing from the industrial class to the residential class. At the end of this tab behind the sample properties is the tax rate comparison of the NRM compared to some other municipalities in the region. So the NRM sits somewhere in the middle between Dawson Creek and Tumbler, and slightly higher than Fort St. John. If there's no questions, move along to tab 3 is the reserve fund balances. So this is the summary of all the balances. You can see the 2020 where there was the purchase of the fire truck from the equipment reserve. Also the budgeted contribution for 2021. It currently does not show the change in the financial stabilization fund, but there was an amount there from previous years of $157,505. With the reduced expenses due to COVID-19 and the approach taken during the budget last year, the NRM was fortunate enough to have a surplus at the end of the year. As it stands, Council's resolution during the preliminary budget meetings indicated Council's interest in setting up the financial stabilization fund. So, as discussed in previous meetings, the funds available last year were 2.1 million, with approximately 991,000 of that built into this year's budget. So that would have an addition to that stabilization fund, as it stands now, of 1.176 million. So 1,000,000, which would have that stabilization fund just over 1.3 million for future years or uses.
Any questions?
Okay, so we'll move to tab 4, which is our overview. So that's the consolidated departmental operating summary. on the top is the 2021 budget. In the middle is the 2020 budget, and then down at the bottom is the 2020 actuals. So 2020 actuals are, as mentioned before, just under 2 million less than the 2020 budget. And we will get into those with the, unless there's.
Hearing none, Mr. Carter, go ahead.
Okay. The next tab is just a summary of all the special projects. So these will be addressed in the department, but this is your overview of all of them. That would move us into our first department operating summary. Tab 6 is our general government operations.
Won't have a whole lot of stretch on my cord, so I'll try to stay close to the mic here. So as council's aware, the general government budget includes council's legislative budget. It includes corporate services operations, executive operations, elections, which you'll see fluctuates year to year based on obviously election years. The finance services or treasury functions, as well as tech services, town square, which is our facilities, and then common services, which is the area that we've consolidated a lot of our software costs to annual licensing this year. Generally, there hasn't been a significant change to this budget, aside from the contribution to the Northeast BC Resource Municipalities Coalition. So tab 6.1 outlines council's budget details. As mentioned, this is fairly status quo from 2020. It, with the exception, of course, of distribution. And I think based on council's conversations throughout the preliminary, it was, regardless of how some of the annual conventions end up occurring this year, just to keep it as so that we don't see kind of peaks and valleys in the budget. And then also noting that there was a fairly significant savings in the ledge budget from last year as a result of canceled travel, which contributes to that overall carry forward amount that also includes the staff training and development budget, which is there in your section. So we're looking for, but it's up to because there are.
So I'll ask for comments from council. Councillor Roper.
No, I didn't have a comment. I'm just, Jaylene was cutting out quite a bit, so I missed quite a bit of what she said.
Okay, the last thing Ms. McIver said was that we were looking for a resolution here on the green sheets. So we'll be coming to council here for a resolution for each green sheet for a vote. Councillor Gerwing.
Can you guys hear me okay if I'm wearing my mask?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I would like to take out the Northeast BC Resource Municipal Coalition and have that as a separate.
Okay. Are there any objections to that? We need a resolution. Remove that.
It depends what you want to do. So if you're looking at approving the budget without the, so I'm assuming when you look at the legislative budget, Councillor Gerwing, you're looking at removing the 38.5 and looking to approve the general government budget as is. Is that what you're thinking, or?
It doesn't really matter to me. I just, before we approve this general budget, I would like to have a discussion about the Resource Coalition. I'm okay with the rest of it, but I would like to hear from council about the Resource Coalition. So we can keep it in there and then we can, or
So-
remove it,
yeah.
whatever you guys think is better.
So why don't we have a discussion about the Resource Municipalities Coalition now, and then after the discussion, we will have a vote. So, did you want to speak to that, Councillor Goering? The Resource Municipalities Coalition, part of that?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
So I'm really struggling with this one. I have no problems with any of the other part of this, what are we calling it, general budget? General government budget. I'm like in favor of all of it. But I just am leery about the Resource Coalition. Once the pandemic has been somewhat resolved, there will be travel costs on top of the 38,000. And I'm just not convinced that we are getting great bang for our buck. I don't know how else to put it, so sorry if that's slangish. And I would prefer to see that 38,000 be earmarked for issues that are specific to what we are experiencing. I understand the relationship development, and I understand about being a part of something that's bigger than ourselves, but I think that we get that through our belonging to UBCM and the NCLGA. So at this point in time, I've reviewed the strategic plan. I don't hear a lot of information coming back from that coalition. And so at this point in time, I'm not prepared to support the 38.
So, I'll speak in favor of, including the Resource Municipalities Coalition. We haven't heard a lot from the Resource Municipalities Coalition because currently we aren't a member after January the 1st. I think the Resource Coalition joining that is a good idea for a couple of reasons. First of all, the majority of our taxes that we collect come from industry, and this is a committee or a voice for industry on that, that we can bring to the table. And the Resource Municipalities Coalition is that voice not just for oil and gas and for forestry, which we do need to have some advocacy for, but it's also advocating for agriculture, and it's advocating for healthcare as well. So I think for the price of this, having a view to where our regional council is now budget-wise, I think this is a wise investment. Personally, I'm willing to put in the time to attend those meetings and to bring back to council resolutions of them. So I think for the small amount of $38,000, I would be in favor of that. So I'll turn it over to any other councillors. Councillor who wants to speak in opposition to this? Councillor Roper.
Thank you very much for both takes. I've been on the fence with this particular endeavor. I just have a question. If we decide to join the coalition, are we locked in for more than the 1 year? Is it a 4-year commitment, $38,000 each year?
It is a 3-year commitment. Mr. Barry, do you have, I was just going to get more clarification from Mr. Barry if he has got more information.
It will be 3 years at 38,000, roughly 30,000 per year.
Yeah. So the price per year is 38,000. It is a 3-year commitment.
Is there any opportunity for us to take on a 1-year commitment and then have a chance to see if it's a benefit? Do we have to commit to the 3 years? Because it sounds like $38,000, but really it's closer to 3 times that much. I don't want to lose any opportunities. We really don't know what we're going to be missing if we don't try. But if after 1 year we realize that maybe we're not getting our bang for our buck, it would be nice to have a clause in there where we could opt out and not have to commit to the other 2 years.
Mr. Barry, in any conversations, has there been any mention of an opportunity to commit to 1 year?
Not that I'm aware of. The proposal that was presented was Mayor, so I'm not aware, I haven't been privy or had any discussions with, members of.
So I would say that we haven't had that discussion with them one way or another, so I'm not sure whether it would be an option that we could commit to 1 year. Anyone want to speak in favor? He spoke against, so I've asked him for one in favor. Councillor Souls.
I think that, to, like, you look at it from a budgetary point of view and then from a, results perspective as well. And I think that there are very few other mechanisms that exist for us to actually work as a teamwork in the northeast corner of the province. And, even though there is a cost, and even if it is 3 years long, what determines, at least in my perspective historically, what determined the value of the coalition was whether or not we had a participant on our end who was able to bring and articulate our ideas and be actively involved with that group. When we did have that, we found that there were times that there was open doors for meetings with ministers and so on that were not available to us, an individual community. And so I think it's actually wise to kickstart this again, and as long as the mayor has mentioned, his committed level, I think that could.
Councillor Gerwing.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to address Councillor Roper's point about like a 1 year and see if it's worth it or not. So we have been members for the past 3 years. So, I mean, I just wanted to address that point. And the letter does indicate a 3-year commitment. And I just wanted to highlight for council's benefit that the price is based on population. And so with the new census coming out, that price could go up or go down. That's what the formula. Wanted to share those 3 points.
Okay. So why don't we go this way? Why don't we ask for a vote on just the Resource Municipalities Coalition, our membership in the Resource Municipalities Coalition? First, I will ask, perhaps, given the concern about whether or not we can get a 1 year commitment, well, I guess first of all, what I'll do is I'll ask for a vote for a 3-year commitment. If it doesn't go, then we will ask that we go back for a 1 year commitment. So I'll make the motion that we approve the budget with a 3-year commitment to the Resource Municipalities Coalition. So moved, and Councillor Souls has seconded. All those in favor of a 3-year commitment? That motion passes. Councillor Gerwing is opposed. Councillor Roper. So Councillor Andrews is opposed, and Councillor Roper?
I'm opposed to the 3 year, but I would have been in favor of the 1 year, but I'm happy to.
Okay. So Councillor Gerwing, Councillor Andrews, and Councillor Roper opposed. All others in favor, and the motion carries. Then I'll ask for a motion that we approve the legislative general government budget. All those in, moved by Councillor Soul, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, just to confirm, that was the actual general government budget, the green sheet that you want to?
Yes.
Okay, just making
Mr. Carter, back to you.
Sorry about that. That will take us to the next tab, which is the general government special projects. So there's a number of special projects there in a couple different categories. So Jaylene and I will cover those as they're applicable.
Mayor, just to for council, do you want us to review each project and individually approve them, or would you like the projects to be reviewed in this tab, and then how would you? Is there a preference?
Can we do all of tab 8? Unless there's an objection, we'll just ask for a motion to approve all of them in tab 8, general government special projects. I'm sorry,
tab 7.
I'm sorry, tab 7. So there's 3 pages here: virtual city hall, software upgrade, and special projects. And 5 special projects.
You have municipal website design, software upgrade to the PLL module, our obligation project, cloud services. So I want us to review each one, or you want to just approve them as is?
Is there any objection to passing them all in one motion? For this one, this tab? Okay. If everyone's good with that, I'll ask for a motion. Councillor Gerwing. Seconded by Councillor Dolan. All those in favor? Carried. And we are on tab 8, Mr. Carter.
Okay, so tab 8 would take us to protective services, which we will have Chief Childs on the line.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So how would you like me to do it, Scott? Just go through the script?
Just explain your budget, summarize your budget, James, is the best thing in terms of where you are with your budget this year. Council has already been, we've been into detail on the budget already, so you can just kind of do a very high level review and then ask if there's any questions. Okay, perfect. So the Northern Rockies Protective Services is comprised of the fire department, the emergency operations or measures operations, 911 service, animal control, and bylaw. So it's just not fire department, it's all protective services under the municipality. Revenue for last year was $42,495, and we're predicting roughly the same again this year, so no change in revenue. We do expect we might be able to reach that 45 with the ongoing 911 service as the highways open up and we get more travelers through our area. We have an overall 6% increase in expenses, and mostly that is largely due to the new 911 service charges. And we did do a little bit of an increase due to COVID protocol expenses for PPE and specialized equipment that we never required before COVID to keep up with our current operations. For training wise, we need to get recertification in AutoX and recertification in Swiftwater Rescue. And due to the COVID pandemic, we have been dealing with a lot of health and mental health calls through the last year and a half, and it's weighing on some of our staff. And currently we don't have a critical incident stress debrief team on our department, and this year we're hoping to start up a critical incident stress team and get training into that so we can keep an eye on all of our responders' mental wellness and stuff moving forward from here on. And moving on to, you're going to see a 3% wage increase for the IFF collective agreement this year. That's what we're predicting. And like I said, the 911 services, that's going to give us a little bit of increase. And we did budget $10,000 for the COVID personal protective equipment budget that we didn't have before. In 2020, the fire department alone, we responded to 322 calls of service from fire, medical, rescue, up to RCMP assist, public safety calls, and property value at risk in 2020 was approximately 15 million, and we did a total fire save of 12.7 million. And we had a total fire loss of 2020 was $2.3 million. Any questions up to this point?
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Gerwing.
Thanks, Chief Childs. I note and you have explained, as does the report, the increase in training, and I think that's a wonderful thing to get back to having somebody doing the critical incident stress debriefing training. As I ask every year, because I like the minutes to reflect, is there room in this training budget to cover costs for emergency medical responder training, should council wish to proceed with that?
Yeah, so we did include, I think it was $5,000 for first responder training. And every year we do have we call it a first responder medical budget item. And we do have some money put aside there for future training if need be. And like I said, we did budget, I believe it was $5,000 for first responder training this year.
And may I ask another question?
Councillor Goring, go ahead.
So when you do training that could be appropriate to cross departments, do we share that training with other departments? And then further to that, the swift water rescue training, would that be offered to search and rescue people as well?
So for our specialized training, we have to meet what we call the National Fire Protection Association standard, so NFPA standard. Our standards are more stringent than what search and rescue would apply to. So no, they would not be included into our training. Ours is more dictated towards meeting fire rescue standards. So currently, yep.
I guess I was just thinking that as long as the standard is higher, I mean, the way I'm thinking about it, if there was room in it, like I understand that there's only a limited amount of room too, but I was just thinking that as long as the standard was higher, it wouldn't matter if search and rescue were trained to a higher level, as long as there was room in that course. But I want to make a thing out of it. It was just something.
Yeah, no, like I said, we would never be opposed to having them attend our training. It would just require us to make sure we knew what numbers they required, and we would let them sit in on the course. But this upcoming water rescue course is for firefighters who our current certificate expires this year. So we just need recertifications. This isn't you teach somebody right from the beginning to the end of it. This is just a recertification for this one. But if we had opening space into this course, we would definitely invite search and rescue or the RCMP or anybody like that who required it.
Thank you.
Very well. Are there any other questions? Very well, I'll ask for a motion then to accept the protective services budget.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gerwing, second by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? And that's carried. Carter?
That would move us to tab 9, which is the protective service special projects. So there is 4 EOC capacity building project, Indigenous awareness training, ESS capacity and training, and the Bearware. Out of those 4, they're all grant funded, with exception of the Bearware, which is $6,000 to the net tax levy. So we can look at ones individually, or council can.
Are there any comments on any of these 4 projects? Very well, hearing no comments on them, I will ask for a motion to accept all of them together. So moved. Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Tab 10, Mr. Carter.
Tab 10 is our regional planning and development operation. So, Toft will speak to that one.
Mr. Toft.
Good afternoon. We'll flip to page 2 of tab 10 and basically go through the operational areas that regional development and planning covers off. Cover off the planning and land use, economic development, building inspections and bylaw, tourism, regional community and social development, and sustainability. So when I look at the budget for revenue projections from 2020 to where it is in 2021, there's a significant drop. 29%. It's primarily due to less anticipated revenue from building services And also, we opted to not pursue the NDIT grant fund for the intern position because we were feeling that we were maxed out in terms of bringing on a number of new staff within our department, and figured that it would be best to just hold off for a year. In terms of expenses, we're looking at a potential 1% proposed increase. Last year's operating budget was under significantly, primarily due to lower personnel costs. The proposed 2019 budget is based on full staffing for the year, assuming January 1st going forward. And it reflects a minor adjustment for wage increases on the basis of experience, and then also some minor changes in the ways that we distributed our costs for services and materials. The biggest one, my favorite one, obviously, is Edison is now an operational cost. It's no longer a pink sheet. So that added an additional $15,000 to the services budget in 2021. And we added an additional $6,000 in 2021 to cover off building inspection services. We need to have a level 1 during effective, I think it was March the 1st. So if Sean is away for an extended period of time, which we don't anticipate, then we would have to put plans in place to bring somebody in for that. In terms of, everything else I think is summarized under the wages, contract service, and materials. Are there any questions specifically on those areas?
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Toft? Hearing none, Mr. Toft, continue.
I think, Mayor, it's most of the stuff was just a summary of what our activities were in 2020. Some of our accomplishments, I think we're pretty happy to see that the CFA was kind of moved from our direct involvement, although Mike and myself are still involved in it, to the CFA, CF Corp taking over that. We were also very, very happy to see that 911 became a real thing in 2020, so that was a big accomplishment. We've opened up our dialogue with the outside community, so we've had a pretty good rapport going with Toad River, and Toad River Area Planning Committee was established, and they've got their people, their designates, or I think there are 5 people on the committee set up. And then it was good to see that the Tourism Advisory Committee was starting to take a little bit of an active role, and you'll see that in some of our special projects that we've included, where you could see that their input was provided in terms of what we proposed. So I think
Thank you. And anything further, Mr. Toft?
No, I'm quite good, sir.
Okay, I would note that, our planning department is very well represented throughout northern British Columbia, and I hear lots of good feedback about our planning department. So I'm pretty excited about that too. We, NCLGA is bringing up those names and people in our departments, and it's and the word's getting out that the Northern Rockies is standing up to the plate, and I appreciate that very much. Are there any other questions for Mr. Toft? Very well, I'll ask for a motion then that we approve the budget, the annual operating budget for the planning and development.
So special.
Moved?
Yes. Just the Greens. Moved by Councillor Goering. Oh, I'm sorry, you weren't moving. I'm sorry, you were questioning. Who moved the motion, please?
I thought I did. I could be wrong.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried.
So that would move us to tab 11, the special project for regional planning and development. There's a little bit longer list on the summary sheet off the start. So would council like to go them one by one?
Are there any comments on the pink sheets for the department? Councillor Goering, go ahead. I'm sorry, what I'm trying to do here is batch them as much as possible, but if there is any item on any of these, please bring them forward. So let's start, Councillor Gerwing, with your first one anyway.
Okay, anybody else have questions? Like, how do we want to do this?
I don't see any questions, so the floor is yours, Councillor Gerwing.
So turn to page 13, special project for Regional Economic Strategy Phase 2. So it says that at the very last paragraph, also planned for 2021 is work to support the implementation of select forthcoming recommendations of the Northeast BC Agriculture Labor Study as supported by the Regional Council's strategic plan. I'm just wondering, I was looking for the connectivity mentioned somewhere in here. Should the connectivity not be a factor in this plan?
Mr. Toft, do you want to answer that question?
Well, Scott and I have chatted about this one. Is that, Scott, maybe you better answer this, the connectivity one. Sorry.
That's okay. So, we're bringing a report back to council. So as per previous council discussion here a couple of meetings ago, we're going to be bringing a report back to summarize where we are with the connectivity strategy and some next steps. That was the direction of council. So we're not quite sure what those next steps look like until we kind of reevaluate it with council. So it could very well be. It's just, I think we need to get under the hood of where council wishes to go and what some of those options are based on the previous meetings ago. So there's a couple options. I mean, the placeholder is part of a budget item for connectivity if council wishes. Or at the time, depending on what that looks like, a resolution can be passed to pull if funds are required, because we're not really sure what that looks like at this point based on the direction of council. We could pull funds from surplus at the time, or we could put a placeholder in, which would be about an additional. We've had it myself and Dougie chatted, looking at what a phase 2 could look like. Again, a future meeting, like somewhere in the neighborhood of about $25,000 to $30,000 activity piece.
Councillor Gerwing?
I just think it's really important that somewhere in this page 13, because it is labeled as the Regional Economic Strategy Phase 2, and in light of all the information that we have received since this was written, I just feel it's really important that it is reflected in this page. I mean, I know I use these throughout the year, and other people may as well. And so when anybody's looking at the regional economic strategy and it doesn't include connectivity, I just think it should.
So, Councillor Gerwing, would you be all right then with a placeholder there on the second phase of the connectivity?
Yeah, a placeholder would work, and also a mention to further work being done via the resolution of council March 8th. Are
there any objections to Councillor Gerwing's motion? I'm going to call it a motion, Councillor Gerwing.
For a placeholder?
For a placeholder.
Okay.
Seconder for Councillor Gerwing.
I'll second that.
Well, moved by Councillor Gerwing, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried.
So to confirm,
Yeah, so for clarification, in the an amount associated with the placeholder? Or
I believe the amount that was mentioned was $30,000. Maybe it wasn't in the motion. Councillor Gerwing, are you good with that?
Ask that a number be motion, just
hesitate to have a number in the motion because I would hate for it to be reflected that we can't go over that. Like there's just so many unknowns right now, and so I would be more comfortable if the motion read that attention will be paid to our connectivity study phase 2.
You want that actually in the you want the justification amendment? We can do that and I mean, so I'm clear. So what we can do moving forward, we do have that document coming forward for council. Mm-hmm. To review the connectivity strategy and what some next steps potentially could be. And at that time, if funds are required, if there's not enough funds within the existing budget, council can pass a resolution and we can pull some funds based on a resolution to council from surplus. So basically, we'll just acknowledge and that attention we made in the direction of future connectivity.
Perfect. Are we good with that, and can we leave the motion that way? Okay. Councillor Gerwing, next.
Okay, so page 14, the airport tourism ECDEV website migration. So the first paragraph, if everybody, I mean, I can read it to you, but I know you can all read, so you can go through that yourself too. But it's kind of like highlights that we were hoping, like the regional connectivity stage 2 project, we were hoping that our service provider would take the lead. That was, you know, stage 1 where we were building relationships, blah, 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 blah. And we've learned that that has not worked, and so we're needing to move forward. So they're not interested in improvements or expanding of services. So I was just wondering if we might want to reconsider some of this strategy in light of the recent developments.
Mr. Barry.
All right, so you, sure, go ahead.
So I just, so for council's clarification, the Regional Connectivity Stage 2 project in 2020 was intended to fund the NRM to create what's called a logical network diagram, which I might want to jump in, or at least kick me if I'm wrong. But it's fundamentally, it's a document that outlines the physical infrastructure of an ISP, which is in our case Northwest Tel. It's what we realized after looking at that project in more detail was that it would be highly unusual for a local government to go in and start analyzing a corporation's infrastructure and starting a design without the cooperation of the agency. Something that an agency or a corporation would do for themselves, because it's looking at basically everything they have to operate their own system. I mean, we could, there's nothing saying we couldn't do it, but then what would we use it for? That's what we kind of concluded at the end of that. Unless there was something out there that said the NRM suddenly wants to build all their own systems, which I don't know that we're there yet. And at that point in time, conversations were going reasonably well with Northwest Tel, and I think whether they were or they weren't, it still wasn't a typical project of a local government. So that's when it was identified that the funds were unlikely to be used last year, and then we saw the opportunity potentially to reallocate them so that we weren't going back to the well to complete the website migration. Any opportunities that might come out of council's report or the report to council to update on the connectivity strategy aren't likely to include that logical network diagram, which was what was in early 2020. So I think it's fair to say that the carryover funds, you can opt to, if that's something further to the motion that you just made to ensure that the RES looks at connectivity, those carryover funds could be allocated. It's possible that our website budget will come in under budget, but then we're just kind of moving coconuts around. Ultimately, we're looking at carryover funds and grant funds, so there's no net tax impact for the airport website project or a connectivity project, whatever that might look like this year.
Councillor Gerwing.
Okay, so there's lots that I don't get here, but I guess my goal of wanting to talk about this is I just want it clear that by doing this does not mean that we are not going to do everything to move to the next stage of our connectivity report. Based on the information that we have received since these documents have been created, we know that we need to keep moving that forward. The value of that, it can't be understated, and for us to ignore that, I is at our own peril. So I don't know how best to do that, whether it's through this or, you know, you guys know the system way better than I do, but my goal was just to make sure that we're moving forward on that connectivity strategy.
Barry,
So, I'll let Mr. Roper next, just so I can.
go ahead, Mr. Roper, Councillor Roper.
Thank you. I understand it's an unusual activity for municipalities to undertake. I would consider it more of an outside the box approach. And I think having a network diagram for the community would be beneficial in ways that we might not even realize today. I think it would be beneficial for tomorrow, the outlook for the future. So yeah, I would certainly want to continue with that work. And I think we can do both. I think we can do the airport connector website integration, and I think we can get a logical network diagram for the community.
Mr. Barry.
So the justification justifies the Tourism Active website migration. That's the justification. Supports the budget. That activity piece will be brought forward to council. Details with, you know, all the details that were just Councilor Roper's concerns. Those details can all be discussed. And if there's funds that are required to look after it, in terms of limitations, in terms of proceeding with the project, there won't be limitations, because if there is a desire and we don't have an ability to allocate existing funds in the budget, council, like I said, pull funds from reserve inappropriate service to look after any costs to move forward if required based on the direct. Is that okay?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I would note that a lot of things change very quickly, and we've got the 911 service after 10 years of trying to get it. Then all of a sudden, the dam seemed to have broken, and we got 911 service. Now we seem to be having some challenges with Northwestel, but I was on a conference call with the Deputy Minister of Citizen Services, who seemed to give us some encouragement that there was some ongoing talks with Northwestel over some issues. And so they may have a moment of clarity where they change their mind in the future too. These relationships seem to be moving awfully fast, and I'm sure it's very difficult to be budgeting for things where you don't know what's going to happen in the future. But anything else, Councillor Gerwing? Very well, go ahead.
So I've received 3 phone calls about the waste that is being trucked into the landfill from all the reclamation work that's being done. And I also noticed in the Fort Nelson News a couple of weeks back that the disposal company has applied for more land. Sorry, can you hear me okay? Okay. Allowing for greater accumulation of these metals and all the rest of the garbage that currently, to my understanding, I didn't go look for myself, but this is what I'm told, is that it's quite packed in there. And so the company has applied for more land, and the concern has been expressed as to what happens if this stuff that is accumulating, waiting for the precious metal market to increase, happens if it doesn't, and all of this stuff stays there, and the company ceases to operate. The NRM then be responsible for cleaning up that whole mess, or?
Mr. Barry?
That's a question. I don't know, Doug, if you have any. The referral came through your department, I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics again. So Wide Sky has a license of occupation for the current steel yard, and it is full, and there are reasons, I guess, why they move or they don't move the material. A referral came in recently, and we provide comments based on what we can provide comments on, and in that particular area, it is unzoned. So they requested an area just off to the west of where their existing steel yard was so that they could, I guess, store more material. And our comment was it complied with the zoning, it complied with the OCP. We did have a concern with the existing steel yard that was there and the access corridor that was going to the old landfill, that it continued to be, like we hired a contractor last year to tie a ribbon line to show where 20 meter wide road width is in there. And we requested that the government, when they did the referral process, that they consider that in before any future application or consideration would be given, is that they clean up the existing corridor. I know that they are definitely moving stuff out because there are rail cars that are parked out at the BC Rail site, and it is being moved by 2 different local people that move steel, and I think it's being shipped out to Richmond Steel.
Question you had, Councillor Gerling, is more on the liability, correct? Like in terms of if lack of better words, walk away from who holds the liability and feel that's there. Is that?
That's one of my concerns, and the second concern that I don't know that I articulated all that well, so my apologies, but I'm just wondering if there should be further resources allocated under the Solid Waste Diversion Community Initiative to help us to troubleshoot, monitor, or investigate what would happen, like that stuff is being moved out, that it's just not being stored. The community residents are concerned because they have applied for more land, which then leads people to believe that more stuff will be accumulated there. And with this continued reclamation work, even be more stuff. So I'm just thinking that we maybe need a bit more resources dedicated to monitor and investigate. In addition, yes, very much the citizens were concerned about the liability, what happens if the company.
Barry?
One that we'd have to take back, sir. We don't, liability one, we can ask the question in terms of who's holding the ball if someone was to walk away and who's responsible, because again, the responsibility to approve the province is not ours. Let's see what's required to monitor it. Know where the situation, because we monitor it, what the future holds. Province, for example, if the province were to increase space where they can store, then they have, in all honesty, and turn around that could be communicated to the province. And like Doug said, rural doc when it comes to onto, and this might not. That said, funds we would apply to this.
Councillor Penny.
This land that they apply for, it's province, not through us. So if they were to leave it on that property, then it would have to come out of the nation deposit that they make to the province.
I don't know that for sure. I mean, that's a question that we can ask, but yeah, the land they apply for isn't through us. It's Crown land that they usually get a license of occupation for, and they've asked for additional. I don't know.
Councillor Goering.
And I don't expect any answers. I know that this is budget time, and this is our time to that the priorities that the residents are voicing to us, and so I just want to make sure that there are enough resources, whether that's monetary resources or our human capacity to deal with this issue, because I don't think that this is something that's going away, and from what I'm hearing out in the community, it's a concern for very many people, and so I think we should be proactive rather than reactive. And
so I guess what I would say is that, we have a budget before us, and if something were to come up where there would be a, I don't want to call it a crisis, but something should happen where there is a problem, resources are available within our surpluses to deal with that, with those issues. Am I correct, Mr. Barry?
Yeah, if something came up partway through the year, we needed additional resources. We didn't have money within allocate existing for the budget. Council always has the opportunity, if need be, to pull money from a surplus, if through a resolution. We typically try to plan what we know, and that's why from various, see if it's a reserve or plus for sure. Yeah, that's always an opportunity, but minutes to reflect the discussion terms and have the appropriate directors in the background listening too. So I mean, one thing we are doing, and that's as Doug mentioned, we're possibly one of the reasons why the expansion, because we provided feedback or requested expansions as we provided feedback as an organization around the concern around encroaching of outside the space, right? The actual, it's an actual business, so the business is it's a legitimate business, and not to get into the issues or with the business or if they have them or not. I mean, typically they will store sometimes metal to wait for the prices to come up before they ship them out. So it's a bit of a, it's bring it in now and wait. But we've been providing feedback around some concerns around the level of material there and the fact that is it actually within the boundaries, right? So continue to do so, and point taken. And then if there's any, if we see anything that are of concern, then we'll ensure that we either A, deal with it, or if need be, bring it back to council.
Yeah, I want to make sure that if something happens that, like Councillor Gerwing is bringing up here, where we require more resources, we can find those resources. Councillor Gerwing, carry on. Very well. I'll ask for a motion then to pass the pink sheets on the special projects here for the operating projects for the planning and regional development. Can I get a motion, please? Moved. Moved by Councillor Penny. Seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried.
Thank you very much.
Carter, moving on to tab 12. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I guess I could do a time check. How we doing? Everyone? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Heard
Yep.
that.
That time, yep.
Or on my bottom lip.
Put it right here on your glasses in the middle.
Sorry, Mayor, we were just getting lots of input from the staff that were trying to listen, that nobody could hear Scott speaking, so we're just trying to solve some audio difficulties. Sorry for the interruption.
So that's better now with Mr. Barry.
If I do this.
Can you hear Mr. Barry now?
Well, the sound quality wasn't the issue. It's just it would cut out from time to time. We got about 70-80% of what Scott was saying.
Yeah, it seems like an intermittent problem, and it seems kind of out of our control, if that makes any sense.
Okay, well, just interrupt us if you're missing something, and we'll be glad to repeat it. Carter.
Okay, so that moves us to tab 12, which is the recreation operating budget summary. So Harvey's on the line to cover that for us.
Woodland.
Thank
Take
you very
it away.
much, Council. I'm grateful to present this budget this year. Not a normal year in 2020 for the Recreation Department. Lots of things that we weren't used to occurred. So at the end of the day, our expenses and revenue were both down. Nobody coming to the building to be able to utilize the space from March till September had a huge impact. At the same time, we did have a layoff last spring, changed the way we did some things last summer. We didn't hire anybody. We used our people that were laid off to help cut the grass and such. A lot of the maintenance didn't occur last summer. The equipment was down. We left it down. We emptied the pools and such. This year, we present the increase is in the budget over 2020 for 2021. And in the write-up, you will see that $164,000 of that are wages. As alluded to by the financial director, Carter, the wages were up this year because of the lift in the collective agreement and the benefits changes. We had $120,000 in contract services again. Insurance, as Mr. Carter had said, has gone up significantly this year, not just for the rec center, but all throughout the municipality, to the tune of $86,000 on this building. We did have a safety plan we need to develop this year, and we had some more regulatory testing that we had to do, so that comes right out of the contract services code. Overall, we had some slight changes like we do every year where it's not being utilized. We take that and put it in other areas of the contract services to try to build up that buffer. Same thing with the maintenance supplies. It's up $23,000 this year. Some of that was we clawed back a little bit of the 2020 in April. We reduced the budget in some of our maintenance supplies because we realized we weren't going to be doing some things. We brought those numbers back, which at the end of the day, once we brought that back with some increases in our materials that we buy, just natural, I guess, increase in pricing year over year, $23,000, and our utilities increased by, we anticipate $7,000 this year. Last year, we had a significant reduction in utilities with our hydro taking it from the traditional 6,000 or 7,000 kilowatts per day down to 3,000 with absolutely nothing running in here except for the bare minimum. So that's the overall budget for the 2021 and the comparison to 2020. Are there any questions on any of that?
Councillors, any questions? Councillor Gerwin.
Thanks, Harvey. Does the budget include any capacity, or will the rec center be doing hiring for seasonal work, cutting of grass, etc., this summer season?
So, Councillor Gerwin, this year, Public Works and Recreation are going to have a joint effort on the grass cutting. And so we have the money in hand for our staff once the ice season goes down. To go out and hit the areas that we would be looking after, like the parks, the Bob Price Gazebo area, demonstration forest, the 295 and the 301 parks. So our cost would be considered or already taken in for the FMs and the laborers at that point. So we won't be hiring anybody from Recreation, but Director Watson for Public Works will be speaking a little bit on that. On what their plan is for the summer. But as it stands right now, Recreation won't be hiring for the summer grass cutting.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Woodland? Very well, I'll ask for a motion to approve the recreational annual budget for 2021. Moved by Councillor Gerwin, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Barry.
I just sent a quick note to Luann, so the answer is yes, we will be hiring some through Public Works, but she can speak on it when we get to Public Works, Councillor.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter, tab 14.
Yeah, so there's not any information in tab 13 because there's no special projects under recreation, so that would move us to Public Works operation summary with Luann.
Good afternoon. So to answer the immediate question that Councillor Goering just asked, the grass cutting crews for boulevards and community trail and that type work, the responsibility is moved over to Public Works. So we will be working with Harvey to beg, borrow, and steal his historical processes, and we will be hiring 6 people this summer.
Excellent.
For the Public Works operations, we're probably one of the few departments not overly impacted by COVID-19 operationally. We did have a revenue loss specific to on-demand water, particularly the ICI water meters. So that would be the one revenue reduction that we've identified. And we've adjusted for that into 2021. Operationally speaking, we met what we planned. We didn't overstep our bounds in any particular area. We did do some substantial ditching this year. We have identified that there's a new local road material provider. So he's providing materials such as cold patch, and we recently discovered that he's going to be doing a dust control product, which is beet juice derivative. So we're going to give that a try this year. It'd be nice to have a local provider for those types of materials.
Ms. Watson, can you just repeat that? You broke up a little bit there. Go back to after cold patch.
So yeah, it's still relating to cold patch. So this new local road material provider, they're called West Coast Partners. So we've tried some cold patching from them, just tested it out, and it's been working great for small patches around valves and whatnot. So we've also identified that they make a dust control product, which is a beet juice derivative. So we're gonna give that a try this year and test it out for cost and efficiency. The Rainbow Sidewalk was installed this year using a new paint material. You guys are freezing up. Are you talking?
No, we're good.
We're good. Sorry. The Rainbow Sidewalk. So the material that we used, it definitely was brighter and it'll last a lot longer, but we are going to monitor it for durability and brightness because it's reasonably anticipated that the colors will fade. So we're going to keep an eye on that this year. I'm just going to touch upon the more notable events of the year. So Andy Bailey was included in our snow removal for 2020 this year, which is an additional 8 kilometers on our rural section. We're expecting the completion of vehicle asset management plan for 2020. We're looking to adjust it just so that we can better address some of the condition reports and how we manage that in real time from year to year. Going on to water consumption, water consumption was approximately bulk water was approximately 2.5% of our total consumption this year, but it was actually up from last year, representing about 50,000 cubic meters of total water consumption. So that's a good sign that the bulk water's going up. For waste, water, and collection, we completed sewer mainline repairs. Locals, BKT Wall Contracting did a lot of spot repairs on the sewers this year. CCTV continued, and we were able to complete our wastewater aeration system project this year, which was 100% funded by the gas tax. And that was commissioned, and it was quite a successful commissioning in that regard. And for solid waste, we're also seeing numbers are up at solid waste from about by 18% up to 5,500 cubic meters, or sorry, metric tons, and 200 metric tons of organics.
Sorry, Councillor Gerving.
Thank you. I have a question on the increase at the solid waste, the level. So the landfill volumes are up 18%, but I note that the fees weren't up. So are we to assume that that increase in volume is coming from the residential section then?
That would be, yes. It's actually anticipated that the increase in volumes are likely as a result of COVID early in the spring. But I haven't looked at that closely. So.
So that's a really interesting dynamic then, and something that I'm sure we won't lose track of, and we will be investigating that further.
Sure will.
Thank you.
Ms. Watson, the road to Andy Bailey Lake, we had budgeted $10,000, I believe, for snow removal. Was it within that 10,000?
Yes, actually, it
Okay.
was within the rural road contract.
And so the rural road contract didn't exceed that 10,000. I mean, the extra for that did not exceed that.
No, it fell within.
Okay. Thank you. You want to continue, Ms. Watson?
So that brings me to really the end of it, with the exception of the local awards. So significant efforts for local contracts this year. A list, my list is cut off. It's much longer. But some great efforts. I have to commend Terry Cavalier and David Dominic, who's continuing on with our efforts to try and keep our projects local. So we were able to keep several of them here.
Are there any questions for Ms. Watson? Councilor Gerwin?
So I might have missed you speaking about the vermicomposting project. I'm not sure. But I would just kind of like to have an explanation or some further information about the vermicomposting project appears in Public Works, but then in planning, it appears kind of like in the solid waste diversion. So how do those two streams come together? Because I think I was just expecting to see some numbers or some actions that we could be putting into place for this year around extending diversion activities. And I didn't see that somewhere, so I'm just wondering how the two departments work together to make sure that we have a really fulsome project in the vermicomposting project.
Mr. Barry?
So operationally, the vermicomposting is a responsibility of Public Works. Additionally, the solid waste management plan has diversion tactics built into it, which has already been reviewed with council and approved by council, endorsed by council, I guess. And then the planning end from a sustainability diversion piece. So it's a bit of a joint effort, right? So, for lack of better words, the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, and it depends on who's responsible for what and what department fits best for it. And then what resources are required. We know that the vermicomposting is part of diversion, which is a very important piece of our solid waste management plan. And it's of course a priority, council. And when we're going to be like, don't believe we're fully operational correctly. What's going to happen here? Because with I know the project is pretty much completion, but we're waiting for the snow to melt before we can transfer worms. Correct?
Yeah, we're essentially operational. The worms are transferred. We have a little bit of transfer left to do yet, and some materials left to acquire this year to fully put the aeration system in, and then have the trommel and the chipper. But operationally, we're good.
So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Councillor Gerwin, but basically, it's a bit of a joint effort. Operationally, it fits in Public Works. They know the priorities are to focus on diversion, and then of course there's assistance or the planning department complements that from a sustainability diversion component too, and jointly they'll look at if it's marketing or getting the word out there or having various programs or whatever to bring forward to the community to bring more information.
So thank you. So that's the piece that I'm looking for. And I mean, I know 2021 is different from any other year, but I guess I'm not seeing that piece in terms of the planning. Oh, I'll take this off. what are we going to be doing to work with the community to increase our diversion amounts? Because like before COVID hit, we had a really cool project going with the school district, and we had one school, but all the other schools wanted in on it. So it all stopped for a variety of reasons, mostly being COVID. But how do we get back to that place where we were?
So
I guess what I'm looking for.
So we've just revived that topic about a month ago, actually. And the sustainability policy, I believe, was brought to council on Monday. So that's the revival, that's part one. And then under the planning, under the special projects, which were reviewed, we did talk about solid waste initiatives and moving those things forward. And we do have a draft memo in place currently from our consultants specific to landfill, or sorry, organics and recycling collections and what that might look like. So Krista is probably going to bring something to council in the near future to present some information to you to see what the appetite would be to move forward with that type of initiative. Does that help?
And I'll add to it. I mean, so it's a strategic priority of council. It's widely known in the organization that's a strategic priority of council. So it's not like it's in the back burner. It's being worked in the background, but there's a number of initiatives that are discussed and et cetera. So it's ongoing. The budget document itself might not reflect activities, but there are activities built into either the solid waste plan, operational plans, and discussions between the Public Works Department and Planning Department.
Thank you. So then I can have confidence to know that hopefully in September or October of this year, assuming COVID does what COVID does, that there is somebody perhaps working within the school district to get us back on the diversion, as long as the school district still continues to be interested. And the other piece of that is businesses as well, because residential is a beast all in itself, but I think there is huge opportunities to decrease or to increase our diversion from the landfill into the vermicompost project within the business community of Northern Rockies and within the schools.
Absolutely. Yep.
Very well. Is there any more questions for Ms. Watson? Councilor Roper.
Thank you. I know before we were doing some activities around the vermicomposting. There was lots of information, flooding the community. There was a free movie at the rec center. They played Wall-E. We had the fish tank with the worms in it. Are we going to be continuing some of that work? I have a really good idea for some time-lapse things and some other fun things. Is there room in the budget to continually promote this project? And I think that would go a long way in raising the awareness and advancing the diversion.
Music to my ears, Councillor Roper. Communication is going to be huge. I think that's going to be your biggest bang for your buck. But we had a pretty robust communications plan in place prior to COVID that unfortunately took a back seat, but it is being revived. So that's all part of that. And we do have some funding available for communications built into vermicomposting.
Thank you. I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Watson? Councillor Andrews.
Yes, thank you. I'm just like a little bit more insight about the grass cutting and park, that kind of stuff, because I know traditionally it was done through rec, and they correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the BSWs would help out as well. Just kind of how that's going to work.
So we're going to take on the same model that Harvey applied. So we're going to be doing the boulevards and the community trail, which technically fell under Public Works regardless. We always viewed it as Harvey giving us a hand. So it's coming back to Public Works. So we're going to be hiring 6 casuals and putting them to work to help us out with mowing grass and whatever else we need.
Councillor Andrews, can you hear me okay? So there's no change to the program overall with the organization per se in terms of the amount of people that we would hire. We've just adjusted the responsibilities so they fit better with the departments who are responsible. So boulevards, for example, have always been budgeted under Public Works, but then the rec department where we're managing the people and hiring the people and charging it back to Public Works, and it's basically an increased efficiency. We think we'll get better efficiencies. We're hoping anyway out of the program by having that rec staff that transfer out, so your BSWs, et cetera, will still be doing what they've done traditionally, but again, more of a focus with the parks areas, the pocket parks, et cetera, versus the boulevards and stuff will then now be the responsibility of Public Works. But traditionally in the past, it's always been a joint effort anyway. Both parties were part of it. It's just we're just shifting some responsibilities to see if we can gain some efficiencies this year.
Any other questions for Ms. Watson? I have one question, Ms. Watson. You know, I've heard from a lot of citizens about how good our snow removal is in the Northern Rockies compared to other municipalities. Do you want to comment on why we are so good at removing snow?
It's just the efficiency of the team. You have great people that are dedicated, great scheduling. They're always looking to improve it. And I can't steal any credit there. It's straight the crew.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask for a motion then that we approve the annual operating budget for Public Works.
So
Moved by Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Carter, moving on to section 15, Public Works Special Projects, Municipal Asset Management Planning.
We only have one special project under that, so unless there's questions on that one.
Are there any questions on the Public Works Special Projects Municipal Asset Management Planning process? Very well, I'll ask for a motion then to approve that. Moved by Councillor Dolan, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? And that is approved. Section 16. The airport annual operating budget. Yep.
I wish I could say that the airport wasn't impacted by COVID-19, but it substantially was. Revenues were under 25% of what we anticipated to receive. So we have adjusted our expectation for 2021 by reducing that revenue. The expenses for the department are similar to Public Works, where we build risk into the budgets. So such events, such as the one we had in January with the rain event, impact the utilization of our expense budgets. So because we're using more chemical to fight the rain, and then the ice followed by that. So that one event actually had ate up probably 40% of that budget. So we should be in fine shape as long as we don't have significant rain events. But everything's status quo at the airport as for budgets. So one of the big features for the airport this year was the obstacle limitation service or surface. So we were looking at potentially having to clear 180 acres. So we updated to a new regulation being the 5th edition for aerodromes, and it resulted in us already being compliant. So that was a significant cost savings to the airport operationally. And you'll see in one of the budgets, we'll be carrying over $40,000 from that budget, hopefully so that we can plan to better address the clearing of the tall trees and the brush on airport lands. We also worked with BC Wildfire, who helped us do some burn piling last year, which saved us some money, and it was a great team effort happening there. So clearly the passenger totals for the airport are significantly reduced for 2020, and the medevacs unfortunately remain high. projects that occurred at the airport this year, again, working really hard to keep those projects local. So the wildlife perimeter fence was divided into several types of projects in order to give our locals an opportunity to bid on those projects, and we were quite successful there. Does anybody have any questions?
Councillor Gerwing.
So I note on the Medivacs that they remain high, and you have a graph that includes the number, but do you have like the actual number? Because the graph, I can't determine, is it 125 or 120 or?
Well, 119 for 2020, but I can include those numbers
Okay.
Moving forward.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Watson? Very well. Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the airport budget for 2021. Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Tab 17, Airport Special Projects, Airport Refueling Relocation Project. Did you want to speak to that, Ms. Watson? Oh, I'm sorry, and there's another one here. Oh, yes. Project justification. Go ahead.
So for the airport refueling project, this was the BCAP application that Sky North actually made that was required to have our support. So Sky North was actually successful in achieving that grant funding. We just are the money holders, and we require Sky North to be accountable to us before we release the funds.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? And I'll ask for a motion that we approve that airport special projects. Moved by Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. I note that it is 1:50. We're scheduled to meet until 2 o'clock. Council, do you want to go ahead, or would you like to adjourn? I have to leave at 2, so I don't see much point in going ahead to tab 3.
Everything, I think.
All right, I'll ask for a motion then that we temporarily adjourn the budget meeting. Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? We are temporarily adjourned. Thank you very much. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 12 noon.
Enjoy your day, everyone.
See everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Well, we might, I mean, the reality is, our head, but we just have the, and which us council has issued the culture groups, and then the capital projects, which all those capital projects are, the majority are linked to IDCA agreements, so. Huh? We're good. We're good. So the bottom line, unless we royally screw up tomorrow, done tomorrow, because the capital is programs through asset management and thanks, bud. Sorry, John.